What do you miss most about your sister?
Well, this time yesterday, we brought you the breaking news of murder charges being filed against the fiance of a woman reported missing more than 2 years ago. Well, tonight, we are hearing from Tiffany Foster's family. They are still waiting to hear what exactly led to her death.
March 8, 2021. A Nissan Altima sits abandoned on a quiet street in College Park, Georgia, 30 miles from where its owner was last seen. Inside, her purse, her keys, her credit card, everything she would have needed to survive the day, everything except her. She had vanished a week earlier, and in the days since, no one had heard her voice, seen her face, or received so much as a text message. For a young mother who never missed a class, never missed a shift, never went silent, this wasn't just unusual, it was a warning. This is the story of Tiffany Nicole Foster. And before we go further, if stories like hers matter to you, stories that give a voice back to the victims and hold the guilty accountable, take a moment now to subscribe to this channel. It helps us keep telling these stories the way they deserve to be told. Tiffany Foster was 35 years old, and by every account she was building something. She worked as a security guard at HelloFresh, steady and reliable. She was enrolled at Georgia Military College, studying criminal justice, chasing a career in law enforcement, a career built on protecting others. She was a mother to 3 children. Friends and family describe her as devoted, focused, someone who showed up, someone whose absence would never go unnoticed. But behind the routine of work and classes and motherhood, there was a relationship that had turned dangerous. Tiffany was engaged to a man named Reginald Robertson, and in November of 2020, months before she disappeared, that relationship exploded into violence. According to testimony later given by Tiffany's mother, Katrina Hill, Robertson took Tiffany to an abandoned house. He blindfolded her, he tied her up, and he fired a gun. When investigators eventually located that house, they found zip ties, a shell casing, a bullet hole in the ceiling, and there was a 911 call from that night. Tiffany's voice, screaming, unaware the dispatcher on the other end could hear everything. Robertson would later face charges for that night, but at the time, it was treated as an isolated, terrifying incident in an already troubled relationship. No one yet knew it was a preview of what was coming. By early 2021, cracks were showing again. Text messages between the couple, later read aloud in court, revealed a woman growing increasingly afraid and resentful. In exchanges from late February, Tiffany accused Robertson of forcing himself on her. His replies did nothing to ease that fear. And somewhere in this period, Tiffany said something to a friend that would haunt the case for years to come. She wrote, in a text later shown to the jury, "If something happens to me, Reggie did it." Then came March 1st, 2021. That afternoon, Tiffany left the apartment she shared with Robertson on Lakeside Way in Newnan. She was going shopping, an errand, nothing more. Her cell phone was active until around 2:58 in the afternoon, and then it wasn't. In the days that followed, the silence became impossible to explain away. Tiffany missed her college classes. She never showed up for her shift at HelloFresh. She missed a flight she had booked to Texas. For a woman who built her life around discipline and routine, this wasn't a woman who had simply decided to disappear. Her family knew it immediately. Something was wrong. It was Robertson himself who reported her missing. A week after she vanished, on March 8th, investigators located Tiffany's Nissan Altima abandoned in College Park, nearly 30 miles from Newnan. Inside, they found her purse, her keys, her credit card. The one thing missing was Tiffany. Robertson would later admit to moving the vehicle after her disappearance, an admission that led to separate charges of theft. But for investigators, it raised a far darker question. Why would a missing woman's fiancé move her car 30 miles away and leave behind everything she needed, her money, her identification, her phone, unless he already knew she wasn't coming back? There was no activity on Tiffany's bank accounts that made sense as her own. No social media logins, no calls. Her phone had gone dark and stayed dark. Investigators began to treat this less as a missing persons case and more as something else entirely, a case built not around finding a survivor, but around proving what had happened to a victim. Surveillance footage would later become central to the case. Records showed that on March 1st and March 2nd, 2021, the day Tiffany vanished, and the day after Robertson and another man, Jeremy Walker SR, were captured on camera at hardware stores in Newnan. Among their purchases, a shovel, bolt cutters, wire cutters, and ATM footage from a Delta Community Credit Union showed the two men withdrawing $400 from Tiffany's own bank account on the very day she disappeared. For investigators, the picture forming was no longer ambiguous. This wasn't a woman who walked away from her life. This was a woman who had been silenced, and evidence suggested at least two men knew far more than they were saying. Detectives also turned their attention to a wood chipper, one connected to property associated with Robertson's family. When cadaver dogs were brought in, they detected the odor of human decomposition. Prosecutors would later present this as evidence of an effort to destroy what could not be allowed to be found. Despite the mounting evidence, one thing never changed. Tiffany's body was never recovered. Investigators, and eventually prosecutors, would have to build their entire case without it, relying instead on the accumulation of digital records, financial trails, forensic clues, and the testimony of people who knew what had happened between Tiffany and Robertson before that final afternoon. It would take over 2 years for that case to reach a courtroom. In 2023, a Coweta County grand jury formally indicted Reginald Robertson on 10 charges, including malice murder, felony murder, kidnapping, rape, false imprisonment, concealing the death of another, and financial crimes tied to the misuse of Tiffany's accounts. Jeremy Walker SR was charged separately, facing counts of theft by taking and concealing the death of another. The trial began in October of 2025, nearly 5 years after Tiffany walked out of her apartment for the last time. Over roughly 2 weeks, jurors heard from more than 25 witnesses, law enforcement officers, Tiffany's co-workers, and her own family. Prosecutors described Robertson's actions as calculated, not impulsive. They walked jurors through the surveillance footage, the ATM withdrawals, the text messages, the history of documented abuse stretching back to that night in the abandoned house. Robertson's defense argued a different story. His attorneys maintained his innocence, telling the jury he had simply been doing yard work at his grandmother's property when accusations began to spiral. They challenged the credibility of a jailhouse witness. They disputed any forensic connection between the wood chipper and a crime, and they reminded the jury again and again of the case's central, undeniable gap. No body had ever been found, and no official cause of death had ever been established. It didn't matter. On the evening of October 30th, 2025, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty on every single count: malice murder, felony murder, kidnapping, false imprisonment, rape, concealing the death of another, financial fraud. Robertson showed no visible reaction as the verdicts were read one after another, each one closing a door that had been left open for nearly 5 years. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder, kidnapping, and rape convictions. An additional 80 years were added for the remaining charges. Jeremy Walker SR was acquitted of concealing Tiffany's death, but was convicted on the theft charge connected to the case. For Tiffany's family, the verdict brought something they had waited years for, but it could never bring back what mattered most. Her sister, Kimberly Bryan, spoke of the void left behind, saying simply that he ripped away a light in their family. Each year since 2021, on what would have been Tiffany's birthday, her family has gathered to remember her, including a balloon release held on the 3rd anniversary of her disappearance, a quiet ritual of grief carried out in a park in Newnan, refusing to let her story fade from memory. Tiffany's 3 children grew up through this: years of court dates, years of unanswered questions, years of not knowing where their mother's remains might be. That absence, no grave to visit, no place to grieve in the way most families are allowed, remains, even after conviction, an open wound. What makes this case resonate beyond Coweta County is what it proved was possible. Convictions of this magnitude, on charges this serious, are exceptionally difficult to secure without a body. Prosecutors built this case not on a single smoking gun, but on the patient accumulation of small, damning details. A car moved 30 miles away. a shovel purchased at a hardware store, a withdrawal from a dead woman's bank account, a text message written in fear months before it came true. Each piece alone proved nothing. Together, they proved everything a jury needed. Tiffany Nicole Foster's body has never been found. She is legally presumed to have been murdered, and the man convicted of that murder will spend the rest of his life in prison. But the case that carries her name stands as something larger than one verdict, a reminder that justice does not always require a body to be found, only the truth to be uncovered. And for a woman who spent her final months studying to protect others, in the end, it was the truth itself that spoke for her.